So components of a website here. What all do you need to learn to be able to build a complete website? So if you want to learn about building websites and you're not sure where to start, what you need to learn about and all that, this video is for you. It's an overview of a lot of the technologies and alternate technologies, and we kind of just give a quick overview of a bunch of the different components that you should look into learning if you want to learn how to build websites. And not everything is on this video, but it does have a good chunk. Something for structure. This is going to be what is the meat of what's going to be displayed, and to structure that. XHTML's there for the smaller systems. HTML5 is the latest, but HTML4 is the one that I would say is the key one to learn if you really want to do for the main web. Learn the HTML4. HTML5 is awfully new, and maybe in 5-10 years it might be prevalent enough to really be able to count on it, but some browsers don't still support it. So I like HTML4. That's the main one I'd go for. HTML5 has a lot of great, extras in it. Video tags, for example, and stuff like that. If you know your systems are going to support it, go HTML5. But it's easy enough to learn HTML4 and then just learn some extra stuff and do HTML5 later on. It's not like you learn one and you're locked in. XHTML, once you learn HTML and you learn XML, it's the combination of the two. Something to style once you're done. And there's also other structures too. They're not really structures, but you could use plain text output. It would get the information out there, but it would not have any of these other things behind them with that. You could also use a PDF file or some other document, but these are the main ones that are really good to go for, and I feel HTML4 is the best. Alright, something for style, which really CSS is the big thing to go for. There isn't really anything else that quite does that I've seen. Now, action stuff, that's to be able to make things happen on your site. Being able to make a button, handle a button click and have it do something. Stuff to do actions. JavaScript is the best because it's cross-platform. Almost every browser is going to support JavaScript. VBScript is mainly only Microsoft supported browsers, which is right around 80% from when I last checked, which was probably years ago since I've looked at it. But it's a good chunk of browsers are going to do, the majority of browsers will support VBScript, but some of them won't recognize it at all. JavaScript is the one to go with. VBScript is a little bit easier to learn. It's based on Visual Basic, but JavaScript isn't too difficult either. And the concept of the script, mainly you learn the DOM, the document object model of the page, of the browser, and the page, and then this is just how you tell it to do it. So this is just going to be some syntax. But I would learn the JavaScript mainly, especially if you're going to do, for the web. If you're just going to do stuff that's you and your friends and everyone's running Windows, yeah, VBScript would work, but for good use, JavaScript. For additional actions such as applets, controls, and code behinds. An applet is usually Java and recommended to be Java. The Java Virtual Machine gives additional trust to what you're running, and so it's an area of the page that you can program in. Go beyond the standard HTML and scripting. You can actually have a piece of code in there. Applets provide that. You can also go deeper and go into controls. Then you don't have the restrictions of the virtual machine, but you also don't have the trust. And then code behinds, once you go deeper on into that, and many programming languages can create any of these guys, but a code behind is where you're referencing an object that is actually meant to manipulate the elements of the page. So you can also use a control as a code behind as well, but normally a code behind itself, the actual control used there, is actually hidden. So, alright, so that's for your web pages, but really the action down here, this should suffice for most of what you're dealing with. Additional media as well, to be able to link in images, knowing how to create at least one or the other, but raster and vector graphics. Raster graphics is where everything is as a grid, and it remembers that grid in the file. The vector graphic will its instructions to draw onto any grid, whatever you're trying to draw. So it's more scalable to use the vector graphics. But the raster graphics, that's normally what you're going to create. I think it's easier to create raster graphics with your graphics programs. Vector graphics, you really need a special vector graphics program to use. And raster graphics, I think, have been around for a lot longer in a lot of ways. So using a good, like a JPEG or PNG format is probably the best that you can use. Music and graphics. That would be your sound files, your music files, all that. Knowing how to create those, or at least get them in there somehow. But knowing how to get them, how to reference those into your page as well is useful. Videos. To be able to shoot videos and put them on your page as well. Knowing about how to work with some of those video files. And Flash gets even more like a video. Flash can actually be interactive and can be even more compressed down. They can have better compression on that, and therefore a smaller size. It's going to load faster, and it's also able to it's able to do more. It's able to handle events and stuff like that. Like you can click on a portion, or you can make a game on Flash. Knowing these technologies is helpful. Servers and protocols. Now we're going into the server side. So that was just how to create a page with that all the way on up. Now we're going to the connection between the browsers and the servers. And the most important one is Hypertext Transfer Protocol, HTTP. That is the protocol used to transfer pages from the server to the browser. It is helpful to know certain things about that, especially if you're going to be doing some advanced scripting. If you need to set up a web server, you're going to need an HTTP server. If you're setting up domain names, setting up that website address name and setting up other services that will be at that domain, you're going to need to know DNS, or domain name system. Simple Mail Transfer Protocol, or SMTP. It handles all outbound mail and mail across domains. So every time mail is being sent somewhere, until it reaches the final server where it's going to be received from, this is the main mail protocol. Certain things about configuring mail, such as that, and mail receive protocols, such as POP3 and IMAP, are useful to know as well. Especially if you're getting into deeper web configuration, you want to set up an email address at your website. You need to know how these things are done. And you can even set up other protocols like NNTP, Network News Transfer Protocol, and there's all kinds of servers out there that you can do. There's chat servers and just all kinds of stuff. But knowing at least some of these, depending on what you're trying to do with that site to make it a fully functional site, these are some useful things to understand. Just seek some knowledge on. Server-side coding. Now here we have a choice. Again, this is a choice item where we can choose which of these. We don't need all of them. You can build a MUT type site, but it is not as recommended, and really it's an advanced thing to do. My favorite though is the PHP Hypertext Preprocessor, or PHP. Very capable, very fast, and cross-platform. You can almost expect, if you're working on a shared hosting system, you can almost expect that this uh, this this PHP, this hypertext preprocessor, is going to be present if they support any type of server-side scripting. The other ones are questionable. PHP you can expect, especially if it's Linux-based. Windows ASP is built in usually, and PHP is the add-on, but almost all of them will add PHP to it. It's just expected. Very fast, very capable. Active Service Pages, though, and ASP.NET, these are both Microsoft specific. Therefore, if you don't have a Microsoft system, you're not going to be able to run them directly. You might be able to run them like Chilisoft or one of the other engines for it, but it's not going to be direct, it's not going to be native, and those are very rare that you're going to run into those. So ASP, I think, ASP.NET is probably easier to learn in some ways because it's a kind of a graphical. You can get Visual Studio and work with that on a graphical basis, but this you can do in a notepad. You can learn it. Probably a little bit easier to learn than PHP in some ways. PHP is not that much of a difference, though, on that learning curve. But these are Microsoft specific, so if you did build a website there and then you wanted to move it and they don't offer Windows hosting where you're going, you're going to have to recode the whole thing because you're not going to be able to use ASP and ASP.NET on a Linux machine. So I like to build stuff that works cross-platform. That way if I want to move my website, I can very easily just upload it, and there's very few changes I have to make by using the PHP. There's also additional scripting languages that you can use. There's ColdFusion, there's a bunch of other ones that are made for the web, and then there's also some ones that are not as made for the web, such as Python and Perl and some of those. And I don't really recommend them so much. You can use them. If you need that functionality from it, you can use it, but it's extra work to get it to adapt. And then Common Gateway Interface allows you to use a specially made executable. It's super fast, but it's not as fast to make. You have to write it out. You have to write out a program accessing special libraries and then compile that. But it's a good, solid executable when you're done that runs even probably faster than PHP if you do it right. In fact, actually, PHP is a CGI executable that reads your PHP scripts. So you'd be writing directly in a CGI executable that functions as your page, that outputs your page. So CGI is one that, you know, you can use it for specialized applications, but I wouldn't use it as my main thing. PHP is the main one that I would look into. Now, as far as your data systems, you can write file system data files onto your server. You can learn how to do that, write files and read files. I think it's better off too if you have a little bit more structure there too. On those data system files, you don't just have to use the input and output and use raw strings for the entire file. You can also use XML, extensible markup language, and that gives you some extra search functionality. There you can actually use XPath and some of those other search features of XML and be able to access information even more quickly and easily with just a few lines of code as opposed to, you know, maybe a dozen lines of code. Then you've also got one of the most popular ones is some type of structured query language, and the most popular I think is MySQL down here. But you've also got SQLite, which is cross-platform, and Microsoft Access, that is a Microsoft-only technology. SQLite and Microsoft Access, these two guys, they write it into a single file, which means that if you want to change out your entire database or back it up, all you have to do is copy that file. But they're also very limited on what they're able to do on their capabilities. Once you get too big of a database, then it just it becomes unmanageable on some of these guys. That's why they used, MySQL Maria database. Maria database is a version of MySQL. And MS SQL, which is very similar to MySQL, except for it's more extensive and a Microsoft-only technology again. So if you don't mind being Microsoft dependent, Access and MS SQL might work well for you. But if you want to be cross-platform, MySQL Maria database, these are key ones to learn, and MySQL is huge out there. So learning MySQL, there's a lot of databases written in that, and what you can learn on this, you can carry over to Maria database. But these are the ones, and they handle huge amounts of data, and they do have backup systems and all that. Not as easy as copying and pasting files, but it is there. And then also for data distribution. This means being able to allow access to your data, not just through your own pages of your own website, but also going a little bit further, because normally it's accessed by the server-side script code. But you can also create application programming interfaces, or APIs, that allow you to call those APIs and do additional functionality, including access data or just run a query of some other type. A lot of times it's useful for accessing data with the APIs, but yeah, you can also use some other, I can write an API that just multiplies two numbers. Now, do you really want to call an API to do that? No, but if you're accessing something with the data on the site, that's more inclined that you want to access through the API like that. So that's the ability to allow access to your site's services, functions, and data is an API. And then asynchronous JavaScript and XML, or AJAX. This is where your JavaScript or VB script, if you did it differently, then it wouldn't. Then it probably, I don't know, AVB XAX or something like that. Anyway, it's meant for JavaScript, but you could use another scripting language. The idea is that you use a browser scripting language, a client-side script, and it runs on that page, and it's able to pull in the data after the page has been downloaded. This is useful for like finding search suggestions. If you have a search box on there and someone types in CA and pauses, you can send that CA up with the JavaScript. It can call an extra request to your API, maybe a private one that's just for your site, but pulls it on up there and gets a list of search suggestions, and it will read that. And client side, it can also read XML. That's why it's JavaScript and XML, because it's usually sending an XML response, but you don't have to use XML for it either. You can use a plain text or some other form. Bottom line is it's a miniature request, and it goes up to your server, calls that API, gets the response, and it's readable by the script, and then it's able to say, add your search suggestions below that search box. CAO, cat, car, whatever else they may have had, cash, whatever else you might have that might be related to CA could be downloaded. So that provides that link between that active link behind an already downloaded page without having to re-download it, without having to change anything on there, and get your information from your website or interact with your website in some way without refreshing. Thank you for watching.